Welcome to Mountain Man Explore the Truth. How's everybody doing today or tonight, depending on the time you're listening to the podcast? I hope you are doing well, my friends. Today we're going to be welcome on John Urban. He's a known writer. He's been in some magazines that, wrote in, let's see, for example, he's been a journalist for heavy metal magazines, Aardschok America Magazines in 1992. Just a little bit of background on John. And he's written books, so he's got skills into his first love of Bigfoot. Famous John, he released his famous Bigfoot and Yeti encounter coloring book, which is a graphically detailed, illustrated history of the most epic Bigfoot encounters across the world. There was a follow-up on the gothic retelling of the Three Bears in the classic fairy tales book titled Goldilocks versus the Three Bigfoots, where there are three bears being replaced with a family of Bigfoots. These books are featured in Bigfoot museums and venues across the country and at Amazon.com, and his whimsical style and focus on encouraging younger readers to believe in Bigfoot and earning him to nickname Dr. Seuss of cryptozoology. Famous John resides in Tampa Bay, Florida. So yeah, I did a little quick read through what he's been through. He's been through some magazines and newspapers, and I'm sure he'll go into some details on that. Pretty interesting. I went ahead and checked out some of his books. Didn't get to read them, but I found them and I was fascinated. So can't wait to bring John on. So bear with me in a minute. We'll bring him on soon. But let's go ahead and plug in some work. So I know I haven't dropped an episode for a while, guys. This is going to be the first one in a while, besides my solo one. I'll get it dropped probably really quick. So I hope you enjoy the show. It's the first time trying to do this with a guest coming on doing pre-recorded. Hopefully it works out and everything goes well. And I hope you enjoy the show, and I'm looking forward to talking to John. And we're just going to get into all kinds of topics, his books, and what his thoughts are on Bigfoot and so on. And don't mind the dogs in the background. You might hear them bark here and there or get in the camera view. Decided to do the studio or do my show inside the place where everybody is because it's just been too hot being in the truck. But anyways, guys, if you are new to the channel on YouTube, be sure to hit subscribe and share the show. Hit that bell and comment. And if you're listening to on Spotify or iHeartRadio or Podbean or other platforms, you can find Mountain Man Explore Truth on some other platforms. And be sure to rate the show. I would appreciate a 5-star. And hit that follow button, especially on Spotify. Spotify is one of my biggest listening in the group right now, so that's cool. Appreciate your support. And I also got a group page on Facebook, so look for that, Mountain Man Explore Truth. Come join us and share your same interests of Bigfoot, anything, Dogman, UFOs, ghosts, you name it. Anything's welcome to that page in the show. Looking forward to hearing from you, and I hope you enjoy the show, guys. Once again, I appreciate your support. Just be sure to share, and if you'd like to come on the show, email me at mountainmanett@gmail.com, or you can find me on Facebook. Thank you, guys. Stay tuned. We'll be bringing John shortly. Today, we welcome on John Urban. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Go ahead and tell people about yourself on your books and all that, man. Go ahead and plug yourself in where they can find you.
Okay, I'll do a quick plug in here. Well, let's see, how can I start? Basically, I have kind of a creative background. I've always been an artist and a writer. I used to be a music journalist for several newspapers and magazines, and I was also a heavy metal musician back in the 80s. And so a few years ago, I was working at this call center, and they wouldn't let us use our cell phone. So in between calls, I got kind of bored. So I got for Christmas, my brother bought me one of these black books that, you just kind of write in, And in between calls, I started, I don't know if you can see it, but I started drawing all these Bigfoot drawings.
Oh, yeah.
And so anyway, so before you knew it, I got a whole 100 pages of all these drawings. And in between, on breaks and stuff, I'd start posting it on some Facebook Bigfoot sites. And I started getting like 100 likes and stuff. People said, oh, you should make a Bigfoot coloring book, And that sounded like a great idea. I thought I'll be the first person in the world to make a Bigfoot coloring book. But then I went on Amazon, I found it was like 50 of them, But they were all like the really Barney little kids, like the frumpy. They all look like Patty. They're like, oh, I'm frolicking woods with woodland creatures. I'm like, nah, that's not how Bigfoot is. Bigfoot's menacing, powerful creature. So what I decided to do is just make the drawings more realistic. And I don't know if you can see that or not, but here's my skunk ape with an alligator.
Wow, that looks pretty good.
So the first book I made. Oh, thanks. Well, the first book I made, I've got a big one here, is my famous Bigfoot and Yeti coloring book. So what I did was I took all the big famous epic stories, from Patty to Ape Canyon to Minnesota Iceman, all these things, and I have a 2-page glossary that tells what every different story was. I got Patty there, Patterson. I got the Boggy Creek Monster in the water. I got Ape Canyon. I'm breaking into the log cabin there, and then this is just a picture of a alpha male looking through your window.
Ooh. Yeah.
So all the drawings are a little bit scary, so it's kind of for older kids and stuff, but I try to make it so older people like it too, because basically what I was trying to get across, because I used to be a caricature artist at Busch Gardens, and so I was good at line art and stuff. So one of the things I'm most interested about Bigfoot is that, I believe the Patterson film is real.
Me too.
But if we were going to say that all Bigfoot look like Patty, yeah, thank you. That's another long discussion. But if all Bigfoot like Patty, that's okay. That's what Bigfoot look like. But there's a lot of variances. A lot of people say that they look human-like. A lot of people say they look ape-like, like Patty, and some say look like a hybrid, like a Neanderthal. So there's all these different spectrums. So that's what I try to do in my book, show all these different creatures and stuff. And what I find kind of fun, I've never seen Bigfoot. I was in Everglades. That's another story, but I heard like a whooping at night, could be Bigfoot. Might have been a whooping crane, I don't know. But I've never seen one. So these people that actually get to see one, and you're reading this story, they're telling what they wore for breakfast, and what they had for breakfast and what the temperature was, everything except when it comes to Bigfoot, it's like, oh, it's big and hairy and smelled bad. I'm like, that's all you got? So I'm always really interested in what Bigfoot actually looks like. So that's what I tried to do in my first coloring book. So that was this one. And it's kind of cool. When I started doing this, there were several of the big cryptozoologists I got to start talking on Facebook, and I was surprised they answered me back, it's like Lyle Blackburn and Ken Gerhard and Lauren Coleman that has the big International Cryptozoology Museum in Maine. And they're kind of helped me out. I'd say, well, they're giving me ideas and suggestions and what I was doing wrong, what I was doing right. So I got my book in several museums across the country. I have a good friend named David Shealy that's got the skunk ape headquarters in the Everglades. Then I got in the International Museum, or Cryptozoology Museum. I got it over at Cliff Brockman from famous, from Finding Bigfoot. He's got his museum in Oregon, and I got one in the Oklahoma Museum, Bigfoot Museum. So
yeah, I've been to Cliff
a little bit. So that's where
I live right by it. Really,
I got to meet him at Bigfoot.
Yeah, he's only.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's only 15 minutes down the road. Really?
Oh yeah, I have my book here. But that's the cool thing is that what I do is every year, I don't really go to a lot of conferences, but I go to they have the Great Bigfoot Florida conference every year. They have it in Ocala now, so I go there. Last few years, I met all these cryptozoologists and started contacting them. So I'm kind of getting started there. My latest thing, and what's kind of funny is that since I used to be a caricature artist, I got kind of a whimsical style to my artwork that kind of appeals to younger people. So I think that's what I'm trying to do, because when I was younger, I was lucky that at a young age, I was always into gorillas and monkeys. And the funny thing is, I think a lot of people, when you ask them, what got you interested in Bigfoot? It's usually like, I don't know, like the Bigfoot from $6 Million Man or Hearing the Hendersons or something. But with me, it's Bumble from, Rudolph. Because that movie came out, or TV special came out a year after I was born. So I grew up watching Bumble, and so I was just fascinated with Bumble.
Yeah.
But when I was I was born in '63, so the Patterson film was around '67. So about a year or two later, Patterson made a documentary about, filming Patty. And it was actually at the movie theater. So I was a little kid, like 4 or 5. My kids took me to the theater, and I saw Patty on a big screen. I'm like, oh my God, Bumble's real, And then a few years later, The Legend of Boggy Creek came out. My parents again took me to the movie theater to see it. So from a young age, I got interested. So I'm kind of trying to get younger people interested in it. So I got my first, it's technically a colored book, but it's really an illustrated history of Bigfoot that even adults would like if you're a collector. But then my latest book is, again, going back to my childhood. I always read Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right?
Oh, right on, yeah.
I don't know if you can see it. That's just the original book, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So, Goldilocks goes to the woods, and there's this house, and there's all the bears there and everything. So I kind of thought, well, what if they kind of changed it and made it Goldilocks and the Three Bigfoot? So that's what I did. I got my book. So this is an illustrated picture book retelling the Goldilocks and the Three Bears story with Bigfoot. So, and every page has a full page illustration. We can see if there's one of the Bigfoot there.
That's amazing, man.
Anyway,
you're very talented. Very talented, John.
So, but I try to make the Bigfoots more, because the thing about Bigfoot is that I don't think they're normally aggressive. I think they normally want to be left alone. But everyone talks how tall they are. Some say 7 to 9 foot, some people say 10 to 12 foot. But the main thing is not so much how tall they are, how massive they are. I mean, they say they got shoulders 3.5 to 4 feet wide. They got barrel shafts and everything. I've been working on most recently is promote these two books I got. But then that's what I kind of touched on my first book, is all of the older stories, like the 1800s and stuff, about the first sightings of Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people, the Bigfoot got popular, in the 60s when they had the footprints and everything. But they date back to pretty much, well, what I always tell people, sometimes people say, why do I believe in Bigfoot? And my easiest answer, well, first off, I think it's just the footprints, because they're physically accurate. I mean, they got the metatarsal break and everything, and you'd have to be a podiatrist to actually make these. So I mean, some people got the wooden things carved out they walk around, but a lot of the ones they have deformities, and they're very accurate, but they're bigger, and you don't really know what you're doing to fake something like that. But the main thing is that they've been, part of like Native American Indian history since 1,000 years, and the Tibetan Tibetan monks over there in the Himalayas. But a lot of these stories date back to like the 1800s. And have you ever heard of this? Let me get the information here. I can cheat and read a little bit. Are you familiar with the Albert Ostman story about the guy that got kidnapped by Bigfoot for 6 days?
Oh, yeah. That was one of the most amazing one I've ever heard. I've always questioned that one. I was always wondering if it was legitimate or not, because some people claim it was just a story, but I don't know. There was a lot of detail to it, and I found it fascinating, his whole story.
Well, that's the details is what I think is most interesting about it, because first off, this happened in 1924, and this guy was like a prospector, and he was working for about a year. He decided to take a vacation in the woods by himself. He was going to do a little prospecting while he was there, and he had this Indian guy take him to this really remote area, and the Indian guy told him about the Sasquatch, and he didn't believe it. So the first night or two, some animals were messing with his, stuff, his supplies and everything. And the funny thing is, he thought it was porcupines. I don't know where he got porcupines from. That's what he thought. But when he finally, so this was kind of messing with him for like 2 or 3 nights, and then finally one night he was sleeping in his bag, and he had his rifle. Because these animals were messing with stuff, he put a lot of his supplies, like food and coffee and his gun, in the sleeping bag with him. This big Bigfoot just picked him up, threw him on his shoulder, and carried him and he dropped them off in this clearing that they're at. They had a whole family of it, and they had a woman, a female Bigfoot, I should say, the juveniles, a boy and a girl. But what was interesting to me is that, people always say, "Oh, Bigfoot looks like gorillas," but in the old
Sorry, you cut out for a minute there.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, a lot of people say Bigfoot looked like gorilla in 1847. So, like in the old days, they would refer to them as like wild men or people of the forest and that type of thing. And so when Albert Austin described them, he referred to them as people, and he called the old man, the woman, the old woman, and stuff. So it just kind of makes it think that they're a little bit more human-like than a lot of people think. But they didn't do anything bad to him, but they kept him for like 6 nights, and they wouldn't let him go. So finally, he tricked him. He had some of his snuff that he kind of tricked the male Bigfoot to eat all the snuff, and then the Bigfoot grabbed his whole pot of coffee and drank that down. It made him sick, so he ran off looking for water, and that's when he was able to escape.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the fact that the guy was with him for 6 days, and but yeah, the description of it is really detailed. So
yeah, that's one of the most amazing.
Like I have it right here.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that story when I heard that one, and it's crazy as you start hearing more and more similar to it too.
Well, the thing is that what I think makes it seem realistic is that he was able to escape, and he ran into some people that took him to town and everything, but he was afraid to tell them that he saw Bigfoot. I thought he was crazy. Yeah. He kept shut about it till he was an old man, and he finally came forward. So he didn't, I guess he finally was older. Probably maybe he didn't care what people thought about him, or there's just enough people out there talking about it. He felt more comfortable talking about it. But yeah, I think that's a fascinating story. But
yeah, I find that one interesting, and I find the one in Ape Canyon very interesting. And then what's amazing is that people start coming forward more and more about history on these stories of, that they had these encounters, they didn't know what they were. So you're starting to hear more people coming forward talking about it in the early days, I should say years.
Well, yeah, it's basically Ape Canyon. What's really kind of interesting to me is that both this Albert Austin story and Ape Canyon, coincidentally, were in the same year, 1924. I thought that was kind of strange.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Ape Canyon one, that's another one. Basically, because they were calling them like devils at the time. And let's see if I get the description of it here. Yeah, they said they're 7-foot-tall ape-like animals attacked them. They're calling them mountain devils. But apparently, what it is, these prospectors, they built like a makeshift cabin. I don't think it even had windows and stuff. And they saw that something was messing with their camp, and they did see a giant footprints that kind of freaked them out. But apparently one day they saw like 3 or 4 of them, and these 7-foot hairy monsters. And so they shot one of them, and it fell off a cliff. And so they decided that they're going to leave the next day, but they thought, well, it's getting dark, we better sleep here and leave in the morning. But that's what happened. And basically that night they got attacked all night. They're throwing the rocks and trying to break in and everything. And so, but they made it through the night, and the next day they were gone, and they were able to escape. But it was another amazing story.
Yeah, and you just start hearing more and more like it. I've heard, I can't remember what story that one was, but I heard the story about a kid playing with a junior kid Sasquatch, and it was a whole story, and I think it was from the South somewhere. I can't remember exactly who came forward about that. Some guy was talking about it, that experienced that, and I always thought that was an amazing story too. I'm starting to hear more and more of that one coming through the podcast world, YouTube channels, and he actually did some drawings like you did of what he went through during that childhood life and interacting with these things. And but unfortunately the Bigfoot that he was playing with got executed. So
yeah, was that the one?
You probably know what I'm talking about. A lot of people heard that story.
Yeah, Bob. Yeah, there's a podcaster named Bob. Is the same name as the guy. There's
yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue too.
Not the guy. Yeah, well, there's Bob Gimlin is the one that assisted Robert Patterson with a famous thing, but there's another podcaster who coincidentally his name is pretty much the same. But he does these YouTubes that has all the illustrations. He told a story about, they thought it was an orangutan at first. They were playing with it and everything. And then the parents came out and all that stuff. And they ended up killing it. So I think that's the story you're telling me about. That one was really creepy.
That does sound about right. That one was pretty interesting. And I'm hearing more and more reports like that, like people didn't know what they were. They just thought they were some kind of being in the woods that, when you're
I mean, at the time, well, they lived in kind of a rural area, like in farmland and stuff. And basically, one of the kid's friends he went over to his house and he was playing with this thing that they thought was an orangutan, and about their size and everything. But then later on, the parents kind of came out and everything. And so, and I guess at one point, someone came out with a gun and shot the baby, I think it was, and killed it.
Yeah.
But the one I think is really interesting, it happened a few years ago, to hear one about the 3-year-old boy that got taken away. And he said he was with a bear.
Oh, I've heard that. I've heard that report. And that's not very long ago either. So that's an interesting one.
No. Well, it was up north in the wintertime. And this kid was, he went missing. And the whole town was looking for him. It was on the news. Everybody knew about it. And so he was gone in the wintertime for like 3 nights. And they just pretty much thought he was gone, And all of a sudden, this one woman that heard about it, she heard a little kid whimpering, So she got the authorities and stuff. They found the kid. And they had a few scratch and bruises, maybe a little undernourished. But really, they took him to the hospital. There was nothing really bad wrong with him. And he said a friendly bear helped him. He said the bear carried him across this river. And he fed it berries. And at night, the bear kind of slept over him to keep him warm. And the thing is that the only way this kid knew about bears is from watching bears on cartoons that walked around and talked and everything. So he thought it was a bear. But first off, in the winter, bears usually hibernate. But if they don't, a lot of times it's because they're hungry. So if a hungry bear was out looking for food and saw a 3-year-old boy, that probably wouldn't be good for the kid,
Yeah.
But also, the bear, bear's not going to feed you. And it was literally carried across the river. Bear's not going to do that. So I kind of wondered maybe his kid was saved by Bigfoot. So that was like, one of the more recent stories.
Yeah, that one I've always found fascinating too, because I was thinking a bear. I don't know about that, I definitely think it was probably a Bigfoot.
Yeah. I mean, because you always hear things about like kids that fall in zoos that fall in with a gorilla, and the gorilla actually kind of protect it and stuff. I don't think bears would do that.
Yeah, I don't think bears would either.
But
you never know, I guess. But yeah, I don't think
never
so.
Know.
But yeah, let's. What else got you thinking what these creatures could be? You were talking to me privately on the phone about it through messages. I think we were thinking the same thing. On what they could be and how long they've been here.
The whole thing. Yeah, well, I mean, just when I watch your video, you're talking about, I think we're kind of like that. We think they're flesh and blood creatures. There's all the things people talk about them being aliens or spirits and going into wormholes and transcending and all that stuff. And I don't know about that. I don't. I'm open-minded about it. It'll explain a lot of things, but I pretty much think that they were creatures that have always been here. And the whole thing about the aliens is that, like I said, Bigfoot been here like around 1,000 years. So aliens would have had to brought them here 1,000 years, and 1,000 years later still messing with them. And I know with us, when man, in the 50s, whenever started experimenting with space travel, they were initially sent up like monkeys and chimps because it wasn't safe for people. They experimented on it. But we're not still sending monkeys and chimps up in space, So the idea that all these years, the only thing that could make sense is that if, let's say, an alien, did you ever see that movie War in the Worlds, where the aliens almost destroyed the planet, but then all of a sudden they started getting sick from the different, germs and everything. They end up dying.
Yeah.
Maybe aliens don't really feel comfortable leaving the ship, and maybe they use Bigfoots as like scouts or something. I don't know. It's kind of far-fetched, but that's one idea. But I'm not really interested in it. I think that they've always been here. Now, as far as what they are, there's 2 categories that make sense to me. One is the Gigantopithecus, 10-foot prehistoric ape. You're familiar with that?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, over in the Himalayas and stuff, and they died out a long time ago. I got it written down here somewhere, but yeah, actually I got it right here. We're talking about 2.6 million to 11,700 years ago, so it's a long time. But what's interesting about Gigantopithecus is that really the only thing they haven't really found a lot of skeletons from. They pretty much just found teeth and jawbones, but they think from seeing that they can figure out that they thought they were bipedal, but they were about 10 feet tall, and they said that they resembled orangutans, or closely related to orangutans. And a lot of people, like particularly in Florida, like the skunk ape down here, a lot of people say look more ape-like. So you're talking about a 10-foot orangutan that's bipedal, pretty much sounds like a Bigfoot, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible that Bigfoot might have descended from them, and or else what I kind of think is that there's some sort of a prehistoric hybrid of different creatures. Like, because for example, when I was a kid in the 60s, I always thought about the evolution thing that, you know, Neanderthal evolved into humans. But basically, Neanderthals and humans lived together for thousands of years. They interbred, and a lot of people, like Europeans, myself included, have a small amount of Neanderthal blood in their DNA. I had mine tested. I got 0.2% or something. So it's not a lot. But basically, our prehistoric relatives bred with Neanderthals. So I'm thinking, well, what if like some other prehistoric, more ape-like creatures kind of interbred and just over time got to be real big and everything? And so maybe Bigfoot is just a result of some other type of prehistoric, hominid mating and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think they've been around for longer than we have, and they're just is able to hide themselves in the forest and everything.
Yeah,
So I just think they're really natural creatures. The only thing with me.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, the thing about being Gigantopithecus is that a lot of people think that they're just undiscovered apes. And I think that they're a little bit more intelligent. I'm not saying they're human, but I'm saying maybe caveman smart, because for them to be so stealth, I think they have to have some intelligence. Because I think, for example, let's say if you took 30 chimpanzees and throw them in a state park, they're not going to care if people see them. They're going to be going where the food is, and I think you see them more often. Where Bigfoot is smart enough to know, they probably observe hunters shooting deer and this, that, and the other thing. So they're smart enough to know not to be seen. And so I think the sightings are very rare. They're what they call chance encounters. Every now and then, Bigfoot kind of slips up. Because usually encounters only a few seconds, they run away. So I think that shows some type of intelligence. So I think that they're a little bit smarter than just dumb apes.
I have to agree with you on that. There's a few things I question when it comes to Bigfoot. Is that, when I first got into it, I was flesh and blood only too. But I start to open my mind more to it because the people's encounters, the experience they have, and they come forward and talk to me about. And I've seen some weird things too, but I'm not sure if that had connection with Bigfoot or not. But the woo factor of it is like, I get what people shy away from it because it doesn't seem like it'd be realistic and true that something like that can happen, almost like magical. Are they coming through portals? I don't know. But I won't rule it out because there's a lot of weird mystery things we don't know about. And what do I think Bigfoot is? Just a couple things I think might be. Maybe they're connected to the Nephilims. I don't know if you're much into the history of that, and I'm sure you have been. Or there's something else, like you said, or just something that's been here well before us, another creation that was created by God, and or something else. I don't know. I'm open to it. You know what I mean? I'm like open to it now because the more I hear about people's experience on it, I start to think, what if? I mean, we really don't know. I mean, I might have seen a Bigfoot, but do I know if they have abilities or anything like that? I think they're masters of the force. I think they definitely blend in, and you can walk right by them and probably not even know it. So I'm still I'm up in the air.
I mean, you always hear about the cloak. Well, I think the main difference between Bigfoot and us is that a lot of people say, okay, Bigfoot intelligent, how come they don't have all this technology and this, that, and the other thing? And I think with early man was smaller, so man pretty much, we didn't have much hair, so they had to kill animals for clothing, for warmth, and that you talk about a man trying to bring down a mammoth or something large like that, they'd had to acquire weapons and battle strategies and things of that nature. But Bigfoot, if they're 8 or 9 feet tall, 4-foot shoulders, and also people say that Bigfoot are very fast, which is unusual as bulky they are. You wouldn't think they would be. Yeah. But so I think Bigfoot is able to capture, deer and feral hogs and things of that nature. So they're furry. They don't really need housing or weapons or things like that. So I think when man was concentrating on technology, weapons, and the wheel, and just technology in general, Bigfoot was kind of more like, self-protection, being, how to camouflage itself. Because, it's possible it could cloak, but I think it also could be just the way their hair is and everything. They're able to kind of blend into the forest, and they're smart enough they can just stay still. They say some people just walk right by one and don't even see it, So I think that's...
Apologize for the dogs in the background. They're going off a little bit.
So, yeah, so I don't know. I think that's what you talk about being master of the forest. That's what they do. That's their territory. So, and the other thing about the sightings being so rare is that I kind of think their senses, I think they have really strong animal-like senses. So I think their night vision is better than humans. I think their sense of hearing is better, maybe their sense of smell. So basically, most people that go in the woods just plod along and make noise. Even a hunter's going to make some noise and stuff. I think a Bigfoot is going to hear, see, or smell you long before you notice it. That's why you hardly ever see it. Every now and then it might slip up. Most of the chance sightings or chance encounters are them running across the road to get seen by a car because, they can't really predict how fast cars, so they don't really understand cars. Yeah. But I think normally that they are smart enough to be aware of us before we see them. So every now and then they slip up, you catch them off guard or something.
And that's
when you see them, but it's not common. Well, the main thing about Bigfoot, you have to figure out, I think there's a lot more sightings that we're aware of because majority of the people don't talk about it. Because a lot of times they see it and they may not see it good. They only see it for an instant and they doubt what they see. They doubt their own eyes and stuff, or else they just think they imagined it, or else they're just afraid people think they're nuts talking about it, So I think a lot of people see it and just don't tell nobody. Now more people are coming forward, but still, I think there's a lot more sightings that we're aware of because people are just afraid to talk about it, or else they just try to forget about it. Now, what's really scary about Bigfoot, people always say, oh, I wish I could see Bigfoot. I want to see one too, from a safe distance, But it's really traumatic for a lot of people. A lot of people that see them, well, first off, most people see Bigfoot aren't looking for them. They just happen to see them. But a lot of people don't want to see Bigfoot. Some people get like PTSD type symptoms that they're just horrified. It shatters their whole belief system, and they think about it every day. They have nightmares. There's some avid hunters and hikers that just quit going to the woods, either for years or maybe forever. There are people that move away from their houses. If Bigfoot comes by their house, people move, get away from the forest. So not everyone's happy to see Bigfoot. They're scary creatures.
Yeah,
And I think for the most part, they don't mean any harm, but...
Well, I think they could be like humans, I think some might be bad, some might be good. I don't know. I think they might be similar to humans for sure, Are they killing humans? I don't know. If it's some rogue one, probably. I don't know. There is a lot of missing people in the woods, and that could be anything, It could be a cougar, bear, a person that took care of somebody that way. I don't know. And maybe Bigfoot's connected to it. I don't know. But yeah, I like to think most of them are friendly, and they just want to be left alone. And do they want to interact with us? Probably not. I wouldn't want to either if I saw us, to be honest. Just the way humans are,
Well, I think for the most part, well, that's the thing. They're, just like, anyone, always got your Jeffrey Dahmers and people out like that. So there's some rogue Bigfoot that might be more aggressive like that. But yeah, I think basically Bigfoot is kind of like bears and alligators. They're territorial. And the thing is, one thing that I've read about a lot is that they're very protective of their mates and their, I don't know if you want to call them children or offspring or whatever. The males are very protective. And I don't really know how big the groups are. There could be just one alpha male that might have more than one mate and their offspring, or they might have a bigger group with other males. But I just think that, oh, yes, I was going to say, is that first off, with females, now this is kind of hard to prove. One thing I heard that they suspect that, since they're human-like creatures, but, we have our, doctors and nurses, a lot of, before he had all the medicine and everything, a lot of people didn't make it. A lot of kids and stuff died. So these Bigfoot out in the middle of the woods and stuff, they probably have a high mortality rate with babies. And they think that males live more because they're stronger. So there's probably more males than females, and then the big males may not want to share them and everything. So that might be part of the thing with Bigfoot. They might, be real aggressive trying to get a mate.
That's a good point.
But also with the children. Well, yeah, I mean, because so I think a alpha male Bigfoot that's got one or two mates and has the children is very defensive of them. So that's why you usually don't see a lot of females and children. You see them occasionally, but you usually see the males. And because I think they might go out and scout the territory or hunt or that type of thing. So you see the males more often. They protect their women and children. So it's rare to see them. So that's the thing, is that you always hear about, them howling and throwing rocks and all these things. I kind of think if Bigfoot has a territory where they keep their mates and their offspring, children, that if man comes, well, first off, you always hear about the wood structures that they see, and I think that could be like a warning sign.
Not to interrupt you there, John, but what's your thoughts on that, those structures? I mean, a lot of people talk about necks, and they see these teepee styles. Do you think they're all Bigfoot related, or is something else going on there? You think maybe somebody's might be staged? I don't think some could be people doing it, but these small ones I would be questioning about, because I don't know. Anybody can go out there and do that, and I've seen natural weather cause breaks and stuff like that in trees, and so I always keep my tail open on that, because I'm not sure if all that has to do with Bigfoot, but maybe.
Well, a lot of it has to do with just natural trees breaking and falling in storms and whatnot. But every now and then you see them, they're kind of woven together. It looks like there's a process, that something that had hands put them together. So, I mean, it could be other things. I mean, it could be them trying to warn people or other Bigfoot to stay away from their territory. Or it could be a way to signal other Bigfoot, because sometimes they think it might be showing the way to a food source or water source or something like that. So it could be all kind of different signs, but the main thing about Bigfoot is I think they mostly don't want to attack people. That if you're getting too close to their territory, they usually would howl. And you always hear the stories about them throwing rocks. And usually when you hear a story about throwing rocks, every now and then someone will get hit, but usually it's like a few feet from them. So I think it's a warning sign, so they howl, they throw rocks and all these things. But if people still don't take their warning and still invade their territory, that's when I think they might get in trouble.
Mm-hmm. I'll have to agree with you on that.
They're protecting their children so that's the thing. The people who go missing is just, parent Bigfoot said, hey, don't come here, go away. And if they don't, they're like, all right, then they're in trouble.
Yeah, I've definitely I definitely came across these structures myself, and a lot of these X marks. Those I really question about, because I try to figure out what they're trying to say there. Like you could say it's like a marker, like you said. But the ones I've been finding up in the woods not far from me, I'm right in the foothills of Mountain Hood of National Forest. They're pretty big. They're pretty big X-shaped trees, and I'm like, what the hell? You could tell it's been snapped on both ends. There's a particular area that I've seen them near, like creekways, waterways, and I think something's connected to that with them being close to water. What's your thought on that?
Well, I mean, that's interesting you brought up about water. Like here in Florida, a lot of the skunk apes, you call them down here, there are a lot of times they're seen actually in water, wading water, near water. So mostly like in the Everglades, but there's areas all over the state. Up in Tallahassee, they see them. Over by Orlando, they have the Green Swamp that gets a lot of sites. There's Ocala's got a national park that's got a lot of sites. I mean, I live a suburb of Tampa, but I'm kind of in between Tampa and Bradenton. And a little bit further south is Sarasota, and they got a very large park there called Maaka State Park that had a lot of sightings that made TV and everything. Finding Bigfoot did 2 episodes there. And there was, you ever see the sighting? It was back in 2000. This woman took a picture of this ape-like creature in her backyard, which is over there by Maaka Park in Sarasota. She sent an anonymous pictures, like 2 pictures to the police department. She thought it was an orangutan. And she was a grandmother, and he was stealing apples to her backyard. And so finally one night she went there with a camera and took a couple pictures of it. And she sent it to the police anonymously, so she wasn't trying to get attention. She just said, hey, there's some sort of, she thought it was an orangutan that got escaped from some tourist attraction or something, because Florida, they got these, different things. You see lions and tigers and stuff. But the interesting thing about it was that the picture itself, if you've seen it, has dark hair, so it's not like orangutan. Orangutans have the reddish hair. But it's just, she said it was 7 feet tall. And orangutans are like 4 feet tall. So it's okay. I mean, I can understand you might see something 4 feet and may think it's 6 feet, but 7 feet tall, that's pretty massive. It's a lot bigger than an orangutan. But the point is that Maaka State Park, it is, I've been there. It's not far from my house. I've been there a few times, and they have hundreds of giant alligators down there. And they had this little, boat ride you can take, and we saw all these alligators. So that area, there's a lot of areas in there that most people in the dense areas are afraid to go. They got alligators, we got poisonous snakes, we got feral hogs, we got bear, we got mountain lions, all these things. So I think there's some areas that a lot of people don't go that these creatures could hide.
Mm-hmm.
So
I have to agree with you on that. I mean, I've heard a lot of.
But anyway, we're talking about water. I got a little.
Oh yeah, go ahead. The water part, yeah.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, just like in Florida, they're more aquatic. Also in Florida, they're not quite as big. I mean, generally, most people that see them are usually 6, maybe 7 feet tall at highest.
Yeah.
But they're a little bit smaller down here, and they're usually seen over there by the swamps. But as far as the water, it's like there's a little drawing here. Like because the Legend of Boggy Creek.
Oh yeah.
This is like my drawing, because that one's in water a lot. So a lot of times with Bigfoot, that they're seen in or near water, like creeks and rivers and things. And it's kind of smart. Some people think that they travel along these rivers and creeks in the water to hide their footprints, so people don't see the footprints and stuff. So that's one
Makes
thought.
sense.
But they are seen a lot. And the other thing about Bigfoot is that they need a water source. So generally, any area that's got like deer and hogs and things of that nature, they got a food source and a water source, and that's going to attract the Bigfoot. I mean, if a deer can live there, and a bear can, well, particularly bears. If a bear can live in an area, then so could a Bigfoot.
Good point, because that's the way I look at it too. Because the Boggy Creek one, I've always thought that one was interesting. And using waterways and hiding their footprints. That's a good point, because a lot of times I'm near these creek areas, I don't find that many footprints. I'll find some, they're questionable, but not enough to cast because I don't see really toes in it. But it's interesting too, because I definitely think they are near water, and that's where I would go looking. And problem with that too, but it'll drown the sounds out. But.
Well, sometimes they feed. I guess they can catch fish. I don't know. They can do it barehanded or whatnot, but also like different things in water, like crayfish and mollusks and different things. So I think, and then the main thing is that other animals are going to come to water. Deer and whatever they eat. I think they're opportunist hunters. They pretty much eat anything, raccoons, anything they could find. So these animals are attracted to water. So if you're a predator and you mostly eat, animals, and the best thing to do is go where the water source is, because that's where animals are going to go. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing about them.
Yeah, I definitely would stay closer to water source. So.
Well,
But you were talking.
But I think about the Legend of Boggy.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, like I said, I was a small child when I saw the Legend of Boggy Creek movie. It really, got me interested in Bigfoot. And but what happened was, I think that was the 60s, I believe. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was a while back. But it kind of made it seem like it happened for a short period of time. But do you know who Lyle Blackburn is, the cryptozoologist from Texas?
Yeah, I've definitely looked into his stuff and books and all that, and I'd definitely love to have him come on the show sometime.
Oh yeah, I mean he's a great writer. I mean his imagery and storytelling is really good. And but yeah, I met him at a Bigfoot conference too, and I talked to him and his girlfriend April, and so he helped me out because he's really knowledgeable about the Legend of Boggy Creek and also Momo, the Missouri monster. They made a movie about that, and it was back probably in the 60s or whatever, and he kind of redid it where he kind of, narrated it and everything. But I always thought the Legend of Boggy Creek was just a short time, like 10 years or something like that. But he said it was going back like 1800s and still happens today. So that's like an ongoing thing down there.
Yeah, I think it's definitely around. What was that?
Well, you're about to say something. I kind of cut you off by mistake. So
it's all right. It's all right.
But yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. Well, the other thing, like I said, he's also talking about in Missouri, they have a creature that they had called the Missouri, is Momo, which was like a nickname for the Missouri monster. And the thing that's interesting about it is that the Legend of Boggy Creek, the footprints they had the 3 toes. And the Missouri Momo monster had 3 toes as well, which is kind of unusual. And but that's the same thing with footprints. Normally they, let's see what I do with it. We got a footprint here. Here we go. So I got a little. This is supposedly from one of the casts that Roger Patterson got. A friend of mine sent me.
But that's amazing.
The typical Bigfoot is very human-like, 5 toes. So they got the 5 toes normally. Now a lot of times you'll see them with 4 toes. And I was talking before, like how it may be hard for a male Bigfoot to find a mate. I think the hard thing is finding a female mate that's not too closely related, because then you got inbreeding going on. And so I think sometimes to see a 4-toed print is because there's some inbreeding going on, which kind of affects, deformities and stuff. So it's not like the friend of mine, David Shealy, that runs the Skunk Ape headquarters in the Everglades. I've been there a few times, a good friend of mine. And he actually found a Bigfoot, I believe, back in 2000. That was kind of cool. I was walking through the marshes and stuff. But he has a few footprints, and they have 4 toes, the ones he found. So
yeah, there's even been reports on
5 toes,
3 toes. So I've seen that too.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying. Legend of Boggy Creek. Yeah, so that's really strange. That could be like a really bad deformity. It's some serious inbreeding, unless it's just something different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't. You would think a big creature would need more than 3 toes to support itself, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, you're right about that. He's either really big toes, 3 big toes, but
Yeah, that seems something more like ostrich-like. But then again, they're big too, so it's anything's possible. But
yeah, it's I think it's amazing you're down there in Florida, because I've heard a lot of reports down there, and I'm in the process of moving down south myself. I'm going to be moving more southeast in Texas. Hopefully everything goes well, and that's where I'm planning on heading. And I'm going to be near the big thickets, and I'm very interested in finding out more about people encountering Bigfoot down there as well. I hear stories are pretty aggressive down there in Texas.
Yeah. But that's where that Lyle Blackburn I mentioned, he lives down there, and Ken Gerhard lived there too. I think he's right now moving up to the New York area. But yeah, they got a lot of things here. As a matter of fact, it's kind of strange. I had a long distance relationship with a woman that lived in Fort Worth, Texas, and they had a Fort Worth monster there, like a Bigfoot type creature years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So they definitely have reports of them down.
Yeah, I believe.
But I think that's the interesting thing about Bigfoot is that, well, that's what I was going to say, because initially with the Patterson creature and all that. You always hear about the East Coast, California and Oregon and Washington, of course, and then going up to the Canada and British Columbia and all that. But they're pretty much not everywhere, but they're all over the country. Like Ohio, I grew up in Ohio. I moved down to Florida right after I graduated high school in like 81. But Ohio has their grass band, and they're supposed to be a little bit on the aggressive side too.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but pretty much all the way through the Appalachian Mountains, that kind of goes from Maine all the way down to, I believe, Georgia or something. And,
and
so
there's not a lot of
of
people in the
Bigfoot
central area. Like in the central of the United States, you don't hear too much reports there because there's not really a lot of people living in those areas. I believe they would be in those areas as well. Maybe not in the country area, but near mountains and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, yeah, as long as they got, enough woods for them to, not be seen and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing. You see those maps where Bigfoot sightings are, and it gets a little bit bare some places than but
yeah,
places like Kansas don't have a lot of trees. You're probably not.
Yeah, I live here in Oregon, and like I said, I live up by Mount Hood, and it's beautiful area. I hate to move away, but things are just not working out for me here. I'm born and raised here in Oregon, but I'm ready for a new adventure. It's just getting too expensive for housing and all that here. So I want to head down to Texas. I've always wanted to go down that way, or Tennessee. So Texas is my first choice, and if I couldn't find something there, I would have went to Tennessee. But I hate to leave Oregon because there's a lot here to look into. Kind of but I gotta go.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Tennessee because, I do want to give a quick plug because basically I got my 2 books.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a store in Washington. Yeah, there's a big Bigfoot store in Washington called Sasquatch the Legend. And they have a big store, but they also have a website. They make a lot of their own stuff. They started selling my books. And I don't know if I can show this here, but I made a kind of a funny drawing of, you remember the dogs playing poker? I had my drawing of Bigfoot playing poker. And
that's awesome.
In fact, I'm wearing my t-shirt of that now. But they started merchandising a lot of my stuff with this design. And they got all sorts of stuff. I got a Bigfoot playing poker game. It's a puzzle, I meant to say.
That's awesome.
And I got mugs. I got shot glasses. I got Bigfoot playing poker cards. I even have Bigfoot cornhole game. So they said I have blankets. I have shower curtains. You name it, we got it. So they sell a lot of my stuff. But the store's in Washington, but the owner, he basically has a business in Alabama. And so they have this big festival there every year, and he had a little Bigfoot conference. And so he invited me up there to speak. I went up there with Stacy Brown, who's also from North Florida. He's pretty well known.
Oh, yeah, I know.
But Alabama, they got... You know Stacy?
Oh, no, I don't know him, but I heard of his experience, and I'd love to have him come on the show someday.
Oh, yeah, he's great. Well, yeah, him and his father passed away now, but his father and him were in the woods up there in North Florida.
Yeah.
And they had a thermal camera, and they got a very good thermal thing of a Bigfoot. We actually see its hands and legs, and it's pretty amazing. So
that
it's
one
of
is
the better thermal ones that's ever been made. But I'm just saying, Alabama's got their own thing called the Wild Thing, and it's kind of like a Bigfoot, but it's albino.
Yeah.
And that's been seen around for about 100 years too. But that's all by, Tennessee, that same area. Tennessee's got a lot of Bigfoot as well.
Oh, yeah. I've been hearing a lot more reports down in, I think the northeast of Tennessee, if I'm remembering right. It seems to be pretty active. And what about this? It came to my mind because Tennessee came up. What do you think about this Dogman thing? Do you think it's something or connected to Bigfoot? What do you think about that thing?
Well, that's interesting. Well, the thing about Dogman, since it is usually bipedal as well, a lot of people might have seen a Dogman and just, if they didn't think it was a bear, they might have thought it was Bigfoot, because it's just kind of I don't say a newer thing, but it's not, not as known. So I don't know as much about Dogman, but there's a lot of interesting stories. The main thing is with me, like I said, with most situations, Bigfoot, I don't think try to attack people. I think you always hear these stories like the Indians said some were cannibals. There's stories of them attacking people. But usually I think if they have a chance to get away, they'll just get away. But dogmen, a lot of stories I hear, they are more aggressive. They're chasing people and stuff, so they tend to be more aggressive. So I don't know as much about them, but I think it's interesting because when I was a kid, I was really into werewolves. And but these dogmen, I don't, werewolves, the whole thing is that they change every night. And it's good for a horror story, but just can you imagine the whole skeletal structure in your muscles and cartilage and everything changing? That'd be extremely painful. And the fact is, in the movies, it happens in 30 seconds. A little hard to believe, but it could be that these creatures are just like Bigfoot. There's more canine, and they're always like that. I don't think they change back and forth with people. But there's been all these legends about werewolves all over in Europe and everything. That could have been dogmen, that they just had legends about them, people turning into them or everything. But it's very possible. I just don't know quite as much about them.
Yeah, the dogman thing really freaks me out a little bit because the more reports I hear about it, I'm like, I don't know if I want to see this thing. I've seen some people sharing footage and videos, but I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I want to touch that, but I'm interested in it because you're hearing more and more reports on it, and some people say they're connected to Bigfoot, but I don't know. Maybe it is Bigfoot that had a deformity, but then people describe the werewolf look. They see this werewolf looking thing, and maybe it's something to do with
they got ears,
something else.
And they got the ears and the snouts that are different than Bigfoot.
Yeah.
That's kind of brings me kind of the whole thing about everyone saying that Bigfoot is just a bear. Now, a lot of people see Bigfoot. They don't really see it very well. They see it through the woods, they see it at night, or they see it from the back and everything else like that. But to confuse Bigfoot with a bear, there's different things. First off, almost every story says that they have, the big shoulders, that their head's kind of sunken in, like a football player with head pad or shoulder pads or whatever. And so the Bigfoot, they have like 3.5, 4 foot shoulders, big massive shoulders. Now with bears, they got the longer neck. So you can definitely see a neck with a bear where you don't really see with a Bigfoot. Then of course the obvious, the Bigfoot have the ear. The bears have the ears and the muzzle. So I just don't really. And the other thing about bears is bears can walk on their hind legs, but they don't do it normally. They might get on their hind legs to, look for things, get food off of trees or whatever. But it seems like the only time a bear would walk along on his hind legs for a long time is if he injured his paw. It might do that. But I just don't think bears just walk around in the woods on their own hind legs very often. So I think it's exaggerated. People say, oh, it's a bear,
Yeah, I have to agree with you on
that.
Then
again, you got the dogmen. But the dogmen, like I said, they got the muzzle, their canine, got the pointy ears and everything. So it's definitely something different than a Bigfoot. So there could be something to that.
Yeah, it did kind of freak me out. I'm definitely interested in it, and that's what I love about my show is I keep it open. My main subject is Bigfoot because I've always been fascinated about Bigfoot since I was a kid, and I've always wanted to do something about it. I thought about a YouTube channel, and then I'm like, you know what? Why not do a podcast? So I became a podcaster, and then I got interested in all the other things because I've seen a UFO, and I had a paranormal experience myself, but I'm always thought Bigfoot was fascinating. I don't know what it is. It's just something about Bigfoot, I'm interested in everything else, but Bigfoot's my number one choice. I'll tell you that. I don't know why.
That's me too. I'm interested in other things like paranormal stuff, like with ghosts and everything. I'm more interested when you can physically either see a ghost or a ghost makes object moves like a chair or something. These people go with all these remote controls and talk about cold spots or things like that. Most of the shows are like that. I got to see something or, oh, that's my phone. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
So I'm interested in real ghost stories. People actually see something. But and I'm interested. I believe in UFOs. I think it's a little hard to believe that we're the only planet that has intelligent life. So, and again, it goes so far back, and the military pretty much admitted that they're Bigfoot. They're UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's an interesting point. A lot of people ask me, because I'm kind of a conspiracy theorist. I think
Me too.
that people like the Men in Black, I think there is actually a secret task force by the government that tries to hide um, Bigfoot. And a lot of people don't understand why the government want to do that. And I think it's mostly financial reasons, because mostly the lumber industry, because the lumber industry is like, like a $60 billion a year business. And they got, thousands of people that work for the lumber industry. And I don't remember, there's a time when there's a spotted owl that they're not be able to cut down all this forest because of that, or bald eagle, things like that. But let's say if all of a sudden that the government said, okay, there are Bigfoot in the woods, and then all of a sudden, they're like endangered creatures stuff, they might tell the lumberers, okay, you can't cut down trees for wood, you can't clear land to build buildings and all that stuff. So it really would mess up the lumber industry a lot. Then also, like the state parks, there's tons of state parks around the country that if people found out there's Bigfoot, either people would be afraid to go there, or else you get all these hunters trying to go there with guns trying to shoot it and everything. So I think that there are like Men in Black people. I know a couple people that claimed that they had encounters with them. They were interviewed by them and everything. So I think that the government does have people, because I think what happened is like back in Roswell, I believe also that they actually did find the remains of a ship and also some aliens. I think one was alive, a couple are dead.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a real thing. Because one thing, if you look at history, after the Roswell thing happened, all of a sudden, shortly after that, America technology really advanced rapidly after that. So I think that they found this spaceship and were able to get ideas to do other things.
Yeah, we think alike
so
on
I
that,
think
because
that
that's
the Men
what
in
I
Black,
thought
that's
too.
when they started, Yeah, it's like, but so I think that the Men in Black started with aliens, but I don't think that they took anything seriously until the Patterson film. They saw the footprints, so yeah, no one's going to care. But then the Patterson film was so so realistic. So I think that they actually kind of keep an eye out on things, and
Yeah.
and they want to make sure, because I think that they have bodies. I think a lot of times you heard stories that people that see a body and they'll call the police or something. Next thing you know, all these government vehicles show up, they confiscate the body and everything. So I think some of that goes on. And also, remember, did you hear about Mount St. Helen when they had the volcano there?
Yeah. I've heard bodies being covered.
So Mount St. Helen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Mount St. Helen, they had a huge volcano. And so apparently the government shut off a lot of area there. They wouldn't let people in. And they brought in some military personnel to guard it. And there's been a few people that have retired from the military that are come forward, and their stories are very similar, that they say they're brought in to protect the area, guard it, so people would come in. And they had some dead Bigfoot there. They even had one live one, and that they're just going around, and they confiscated these dead, and one they found that was dying, they put it down, but there's at least one live one that they took away.
Yeah.
And but they had all the bodies, so I'm pretty sure the government has dead bodies. They might have them in captivity. They might, I think they might tag some of them so they kind of keep an eye on where they migrate and everything. So I think the government knows all about Bigfoot, but they don't want us to know about it yet.
That's a good possibility, because once again, I don't live too far from Mount St. Helens either. It's just right across the border over here, and I've heard people talk about that, and they always thought, oh, that's not true. People coming on podcasts saying it wasn't true. But I'm like, I don't know, man. I've been hearing a lot more people coming forward saying they've seen these things there and them recovering them after it happened. And you're right. Maybe that's why the government doesn't want to listen to people, because they know about them already, which I believe they do. And that's why they don't look into it. They just let people keep talking about it,
Yeah, I think they let people talk about it, but I think if it got too hardcore evidence, I think they would try to confiscate it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think they watch closely and stuff. And you mentioned Mount Helen. I'm going to bring my picture out, but like Ape Canyon, that was right by Mount St. Helen.
Yep.
Where they had the big Ape Canyon.
That's amazing, man.
So, so they're talking. Well, that's like back 1924. So like they had Bigfoot back then. So why wouldn't they still have it now? So
Yeah, I brought this up in the show
It's
a couple
definitely
times too about a friend of mine. His friend had a experience up here on Wildcat. I live up Wildcat Road here. He was out bow hunting, and I've always talked about this on the show because I found it very interesting on description because he had a good look at this thing. Um, Freaked me out the way he described the eye color. I'll tell you that in a moment here. But he was out hunting, bow hunting, and he had his eye on a deer. He was getting ready to take it out, and then he heard a snap on the left of him, and he looks to the left of him, and he sees something peeking around the tree at him. And he said what he saw, he was in shock. He said what he saw was something upright, and what he said he could compare it to was Harry the Harrison Bigfoot, but more human-like in the face, with a little bit of orange in his eyes and black pupil. And that's what freaked me out, is the description of the eyes that he told me that had a little orange color to it, and he just said, look, that disturbed him. And he just said, just look a lot like the Harry the Henderson type body build and reddish hair. And he just said that more human-like in the face. And I found that fascinating. And I had to ask my buddy, you should get him to draw that or bring him on my show. But the guy's so messed up over it. He's not ready to come on shows. And he's actually drinking a lot because of it. This happened about a couple of years ago. So I'll hope I
it kind of
can
messes some people up.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, it just totally your whole belief system, that, you believe these things don't exist. You see something that's not supposed to exist, and it just kind of shatters people's the way things are supposed to be, They're not supposed to be having 7-8 foot, creatures, half man, half ape. And well, that's why, again, I think it's really interesting about Bigfoot is that some people say that they're very human looking in the face. Mm-hmm. And like, for examples, I've heard several stories about hunters. They go out and they see this big Bigfoot and everything, and they're going to shoot it. And they get their rifle out and they look through the scope, it magnifies it. And the face looks so human that they couldn't bring themselves to shoot it because it looks so human looking. So,
yeah.
So, yeah, but that Harry and the Henderson movie, the good thing about that, it was a comedy and it was done really well. And Rick Baker, pickup artist, that did, American Werewolf in London and all these great films like that. It's like they used a lot of computer stuff, the facial and everything, but basically a guy in a suit. So that even though the movie's kind of a comedy, it kind of opened the door a lot because it really one of the first major movies made about Bigfoot. So I kind of like for something to come out since then because there's all these low budget movies. Some are better than others, but
I have to agree with you on that.
But I like to see a big movie.
Yeah.
But the problem is with Bigfoot is that we talked about, I think normally they don't attack movie, but 90% of these Bigfoot movies, it's more interesting to have a horror slasher movie with Bigfoot killing people than have some happy, hey, how's it going? It's like Harry and Henderson was that way. They had a movie. You ever hear of Letters from the Big Man?
It sounds familiar, but I don't think I watched it.
They had yeah, it's worth watching. They have a very good costume. It's based on this woman that she goes out. She's has something to do with the environment. That she takes water samples, goes out in the woods, getting samples and stuff. But she keeps seeing this Bigfoot and everything. And it's more of a gentle, passive creature and stuff. And so it's kind of, that one kind of shows a more, non-aggressive, intelligent type creature and stuff. So it's definitely worth to watch that one. Are there any Bigfoot movies you like besides the obvious?
I've been watching a lot of the documentary ones on Bigfoot. I haven't really watched too many movies on Bigfoot. I've always been interested in the topic of Bigfoot on documentaries of people talking about their experience. But if I was going to choose a movie, it would have been Harry the Henderson. I love that movie. But there is some thriller ones I was looking into. I can't remember the name of the one. The one where the guy had a family and he owned a farm, and they were having a Bigfoot that kept. I can't remember the name of that movie. But that was
I think that's one I was just about to bring up. I think it's called "There's Something in the Woods."
Yes, that's it.
And that's when the guy's on the farm, and first the little boy saw it. He called it the Cowman. And that's cool because that one is actually based on a real story. Because the boy he called it Cowman because it's a big caricature. You don't know what it was. He's pretty young. But what was kind of creepy about that story is that some people think with Bigfoot that they do abduct children, and sometimes, sometimes unfortunately it might be to eat it or something. But other times they think, like I said, that since there is a high rate of mortality with Bigfoot children, that's this, like they got a Bigfoot couple or female, whatever, that they lose a child and then they ended up trying to abduct a small child to replace it. And that's what they thought was going on, because the Bigfoot kept going to the kid's room, looking in the window, trying to communicate it. They thought that this Bigfoot was drawn to the small child. And they basically there's another situation. They moved away from the house because they had the big encounter with it. And so they all kind of left. The guy the father, they went to his brother's house. And when they came back the next day, their house was trashed.
Yeah.
And so they moved away. But that was a good one.
Yeah, I really found that one to be interesting. Again, it's cool.
Yeah, it had pretty good makeup on it for the Bigfoot.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever. I don't know if you're familiar with the book, the Oregon's, the Bigfoot's Oregon Highway, I think it was called. I can't remember, but there's a lot of stories talking about out here in the Estacada area where there were a lot of real aggressive encounters in that area. But when I read in that book, they can definitely make a movie out of that. I'll tell you that. It wouldn't surprise me if they do eventually, because there's a lot of strange stories in there, like kind of like the movie we're talking about. And, there was one incident where a guy was a logger and he had his own place in the remote area, and they disappeared. Him and his family disappeared up there, and nobody knows what happened to him. He kept making reports that he was dealing with something in the woods to his friends and all that. And shortly after that, his whole family and him disappeared. Reminds me of that story, but this one is strange because nobody knows what happened to them.
Well, a lot of people do go missing, so you just never know. Because, just like we said, how there's good and bad people, I think because another thing that could happen is that, like with gorillas, they have an alpha male, and if another male challenges it, whoever wins, they kick the other one out.
Yeah. And
so it could be something like that. We have some sort of Bigfoot group, and either like an older male, some younger, stronger one challenges them, or else somebody tries to challenge alpha and they lose. But if that would happen, the loser would be cast out. And so you could have this rogue going by the woods, and they might be desperate, and because you got to think, if you're like this 8-foot tall creature and you're hungry and you're kind of pissed off because you got cast out of this group and you're on your own and everything, not having a good day. If you see like a regular, 5'10" person walking around the woods, I mean, it'd be an easy meal. I mean, because a lot easier to catch. I mean, they may say, okay, no one's here, I'm going to go eat this thing, or, whatever, it's possible. But I don't think it happens all the time, because if it happened, if every week 5 people would be going missing in one general area, I think that they'd make more an effort to go out there and find out what's going on. So I don't think it happens a lot, but I think it could happen.
Yeah, good point. I seem to buy that too, where there could be some aggression coming from some, and they'd be very territorial of their area, and they want you out. If you're not going to go out, they're going to show some aggression, I bet. So, good point.
Well, another thing is what I think is interesting about Bigfoot, the fact that they're so huge. And, well, one thing, you don't really hear a lot of stories about skinny or fat Bigfoot. Almost most of the stories are so muscular, even through their fur, you can see their muscles. Like in the Patterson film, you can see the legs flexing, their back thighs and all that. So, and they got the 4-foot wide shoulders they keep talking about and all that stuff. They're, the arms down below their legs. And they're just incredibly powerful animals. And so I think, but the main thing is despite how bulky they are, they're supposed to be very fast and almost graceful when they walk. So you always hear how fast they are. So I think they could outrun a person. So when you hear these stories about somebody being chased out of the woods, I don't think the Bigfoot is trying to catch them. I think they're just trying to scare them, to chase them out of the woods and make sure they don't want to come back. But I think if a Bigfoot wanted to catch you, they probably could have. Because that's their turf. Mm-hmm. They can run through all the woods and crash through bushes and all that stuff. So I think 9 times out of 10, they don't want to attack you. But I think it could happen.
Yeah, I agree. So have you ever thought about, or have you gone out in some areas that you like to go check out and research, or you just kind of look into other people's reports?
Yeah, I kind of, yeah, I've been in a few car accidents, so I can walk and everything, but I'm not really that good at walking far and everything. So
Yeah.
I don't really, I'm not going to parks on the trails. I'm just not one that's going to go out in the middle of the night in Florida with all the alligators and snakes and stuff.
Yeah, I would.
I'm kind of afraid to do that, to be honest.
Yeah, you don't
I'm
really
more
have to go
about
too far. That's for
riding and
sure.
driving.
I don't think you'd have to go that far because I hear a lot of
well,
people.
like I said, well, it's funny because I live in the suburb of Tampa, and they got this area there called Lettuce Lake in Tampa, and they have a lot of wildlife. I used to work for a call center for Walt Disney out there, and it's right by Lettuce Lake, and I'd see deer running in front of my car and all sorts of animals, bobcats, and all sorts of, and then we'd see alligators walk around the parking lot. So there's a lot of animals out there. So there have been some sightings of Bigfoot in Lettuce Lake Park in Tampa, but also, like I said, at Mayaca State Park, I talked about by Sarasota, that's, a lot of stories out there. I mean, there's one where a man and his adult son were driving through Mayaca State Park, and they saw 2 or 3 cars pulled over by the side of the road. And they came out and they saw in the distance in the marsh, there was it's only about this big, but they saw, looked like a hairy creature walking. And what was cool about that is that several different cars of people that didn't know each other all saw the same thing, so that was in Mayaca Park. But then you hear stories like that, like there's one where a whole bus full of people saw Bigfoot. So when you see people that don't know each other all seeing the same thing, it kind of gives it more credibility.
Mm-hmm. I have to agree with you on that because there's a lot of people that are out there that have the encounters, and like you said, are afraid to come forward because they most likely experience it by themselves, and nobody seems to believe them. And it's only people like-minded like us that do believe in them. Yeah, we got some of those people like to maybe hoax you and make up stuff, but there's something else going on with that person for them to do that. But I'm not saying all of them are like that. I think a lot of people definitely had legitimate encounters and experience, and there's quite the number of them out there. I'm learning as I'm getting into podcasts and hearing more reports. And you just got to try to rule all the ones that are trying to, do something different with. I don't know why they would, want to hoax, but we got them out there, and unfortunately, we got AI, and that's gonna make it a little harder on some things too when it comes to Bigfoot.
Well, the problem with AI is that pretty much, I don't think anyone that gets a good video or a picture of a Bigfoot is going to prove it because AI is so good. Everyone's going to say, oh, it's the AI. The funny thing is, everyone always complains about the pictures being blurry, but if it looks too good, then they say, oh, it's AI. So
yeah.
I mean, if they can make Jurassic Park, they can do anything. So,
mm-hmm.
So it's sad to say, but really the only way that they're going to prove Bigfoot is one in a cage or one on a slab, a body of some nature, which I don't want to see that happen and everything. I mean, there are some groups, they had a show, I think it was called Killing Bigfoot, where these people are out trying to kill a Bigfoot, and that their whole thing is, well, we just want to get one alpha male just to prove it exists, and then they'll protect and say they're necessary evil type of thing as well. We're willing to sacrifice one just to prove they exist, and the rest can be protected. But of course, most people.
Yeah, I don't believe in
killing a Bigfoot purposely just to prove it.
Yeah, I don't believe in killing one myself. I think only if you had to for self-defense, but for, like you said, for evidence, I don't think we would need to. I think it's just got to be something kind of like the Patterson film. Like people keep thinking that's a man in a suit, and I go, no. Look at the muscle moving in that. There's no way they had that technology of the suit. So, I guess
well, that's interesting because the whole thing with Patterson is that a lot of people are skeptical because he did go out there to make a film about Bigfoot. And he did, I think one of the biggest controversies is that he made a little booklet, I think he called The Abominable Snowman of America. And he had a drawing of a female Bigfoot with breasts. And then he shot Patty, who had breasts. So people say, oh, yeah, he set that up. But it's just, it's just the fact that you can actually see muscles rippling and everything. And like the arms that went down, longer than humans, you could have extensions on your arms, but you can't have extensions that bend at the elbow.
Yeah.
And so I just don't think that there's any way they could have made a suit like that back in 1967. Because even if you watch movies, back then, the Bigfoot, because I remember they used to have like a gorilla, like on Addams Family or Gilligan's Island. It's always the same. The mask would look pretty good, but the body's all just flabby and, no form to it. And because one of the interesting things is, coincidentally, he filmed Patty in 1967. In 1968, the first Planet of the Apes movie came out. And the Planet of the Apes had all the amazing facial appliances that are very realistic in the face. So there's a rumor, this guy named John Chambers that did the makeup for Planet of the Apes, he actually won an Academy Award for the makeup. So a lot of people think that Patterson hired John Chambers. Okay, Patterson was a broke-ass cowboy, a rodeo cowboy. He was not a wealthy person. So I don't see how he could have hired one of the biggest makeup artists in Hollywood to make this costume. And then secondly, the main thing about it, if he was able to find someone to make this costume, he might say, okay, I'll give you $5,000, don't tell anybody. But once this film became a world sensation, if I made that costume and I paid, some guy paid me a few hundred or a few $1,000s, and it became a world sensation, I wouldn't get credit for it. I'd say, well, screw you. You can have your $5,000 back. I'm going forward. And whoever made it, if they made one, they could make another one. And no one's been able to do that. There's been that one guy you probably saw that claimed that he was the one in the costume, and they had the real fake-looking costume and everything. But I just don't believe it. I think it's too good. It's still, for 50 years, they've never officially debunked it. And a lot of Hollywood experts and different people think it could have been, they'd have trouble doing it now without AI and electronics. Like the Harry and Henderson thing, everything with his face, every time he smiled, everything else all done to electronics. And so people in the back, is a guy wearing a costume, but most of the facial things is all done electronically. So
yeah,
I don't think they could have made that costume then. So
I agree.
It's real.
I agree too. I agree it's real. And I think we got a handful.
Desperate.
I think we got a handful of videos out there that are legitimate and some questionable. Like the one up in Idaho, that was a big, massive looking Bigfoot. You could tell that was a male. I believe that one's real. I don't know if you've seen that video going around. It's a short clip of it. You see it walking around. It looked a lot like Patty, but it was a big buff male. You could just tell the size of it.
Well, did you ever see the one? I think it was on, Independence Day or 4th of July or something like that. They showed a Bigfoot that was holding a baby. Did you ever see that one?
Oh, and was it that?
They showed it from the side.
New York?
And it didn't have it could have been. But then you see this Bigfoot, he kind of goes behind this tree and he kind of hides. It kind of like does one of these deals. And then when it leaves, it's holding a baby, and you can see the baby moving.
Yeah.
So either they have some sort of electronic doll that moves, or they have a real baby in a Bigfoot costume, which I don't know. That's kind of weird. But that one I liked. That one I thought looked really good. It looked kind of like Patty as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few one out there that are good.
And then you got to worry about the people out there.
But I just think,
I don't know if you've seen this a lot going on in the Bigfoot world too, is that researchers going out there. I have a lot of respect for a handful of researchers, but some I kind of iffy about. Every time you see them going out, they'll point out everything in the tree saying that's a Bigfoot, but that's a pareidolia effect in there too. I don't know, maybe they're cloaking, but I don't know. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, the whole shadowy thing. Well, for one thing, I just know a lot of people I talk to that, kind of more experienced people like Stacey Brown, that if people go and see a Bigfoot every time they go in the woods, they're probably imagining it. It's just a very rare thing to happen. I mean, you may be lucky enough to see Bigfoot more than once, but I get a little skeptical of these people. It's, I see Bigfoot all the time. Now, there are some people that live in an area where Bigfoot are, and that over a course of time, they gift them and stuff. They come by the house, but that takes months, if not years, to happen. So I know one person I talked to on Facebook that claims that he has some Bigfoot that live by his house and everything. That's possible, but that's a really dangerous thing to do, is to gift Bigfoot, because what I always tell people is you don't want to give Bigfoot to know where you live. Because let's say you start feeding it every day, then you stop. Let's say you go on vacation 2 weeks, you come back, your house is trashed because they're mad because you stopped giving them food. You don't really want them to know where you live. But I think it is possible for people to see Bigfoot more than once. But people that see him every time they go in the woods, I'm like, they're just wishful thinking.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, I have to agree with you. So, but yeah, I've had a decent amount of researchers come on the show, and they actually changed my mind on a couple things with Bigfoot. That's why I kind of opened up more about the woo side, and then I'm in the middle now. I used to, like I said, just be flesh and blood,
Yeah.
but I think there's something else going on because I keep hearing more about these portals and the metallic sound when it happens, and these orbs. It's weird because the only reason I start to buy into it is because I had an experience of my own up here in the mountains where I saw this possibly Bigfoot across the canyon. I can't 100% say it was, but it was definitely huge. But a day or so after that, I seen these orbs flying around over there, and I didn't know what to make of those. I'm like, what the hell? And I had my wife come out, and she saw those. So I started to open my mind more. I'm like, what are these orbs? Happened to be in the area where I saw that thing walking across. So
But one thing, what a lot of people that complain about all the pictures being blurry. And nowadays with cell phones, I mean, it's going to be more apt to people that carry the phones around that they will see Bigfoot. But the problem is, let's say I got my cell phone here. Let's say I'm walking. You'd have to be walking around with your camera ready to go.
yeah,
Because usually Bigfoot encounters are a few seconds. They're not going to hang around. So let's say right now, okay, I turn on my phone, and it just happens to be on. I didn't have to turn it on. Then I go here, and then I go turn on my picture.
and then boom, it's gone.
And, usually it's like, see my face. Oh, this is like,
Yep.
yeah. And then they're finally ready. Then they're not going to hang around.
That's what happens to me.
What I
all
like
the time,
to tell when
man.
people complain about the pictures,
So
that'd be my luck. I'd see a Bigfoot, and I'd be like, I got to turn the phone on, and got to hit the one button and another button, and all that stuff.
well, that's what happened to
But
me
as far
when I
as the
saw
pictures being blurry,
whatever I saw across the canyon. I was not thinking about that. I was like, what is that? What is that? I just kept staring at it.
oh yeah, you see something like that, you're going to be intrigued and everything. Well, but it's kind of interesting because I always thought that, let's say you see Bigfoot. Now, a lot of times people don't see their face. I mean, a lot of times they say they see it from the back, or it's dark, they're behind trees, and they're just too far away to see any facial details. You don't really hear a lot of stories where people give really details of their face, or they're just really vague. They'll say they had red eyes or something, but they don't really. I always went, okay, did they have a big forehead? Did it look ape-like? Did they have what kind of nose? Was it an ape-like nose? Was it a round nose? Blah, blah, blah. I'm an artist, so I want to hear all these details, and you very rarely hear that. But the main thing about the whole blurry picture thing is that, like I said, seeing a Bigfoot, 7-8 foot Bigfoot, with 4 foot shoulders, rippling with muscles and everything. I say, let's say, for example, you were in the woods, and then all of a sudden, a big silverback gorilla comes out, and you're there by yourself. You got this gorilla, you'd be freaking out, right? Because you don't know what it's going to do. But now gorillas are supposed to be about roughly 6 times as strong as a person. So you see this gorilla in the woods, you're all freaked out. Now keep in mind, gorillas generally are only about 5'2". They're not really that tall, but they're 6 times as strong as a person. Let's say you go back to the woods the next week, and all of a sudden you see this Bigfoot come out, some unpredictable creature that's not supposed to exist. You're not supposed to be seeing that. But all of a sudden, this thing's 8 or 9 feet tall. So a 5-foot gorilla's 6 times as strong as a person. Can you imagine how powerful like an 8 or 9 foot Bigfoot would be? And also, if they could probably outrun you, all these things. If you saw this huge, massive, unknown creature, would you be able to sit there and take a picture? I'd be like, it's like, it'd be hard to take these glamour shots where you're seeing this huge creature. You don't know what's going to do. So,
Yeah, good point, because
this idea of getting a nice steady shot.
You see that a lot when people have it.
I'd be like,
yeah. I agree with you, because there are people that talk about it, that had these experiences. They'll say straight to your face that I wasn't thinking about it. I know what I saw. I don't care what you think. I could tell you what I saw. You take it for that. And I appreciate that when people do that. They're coming forward and talk about it, because, they're not going to care what people think or believe, believe them or not. Now, it's a difference when people are worried about facing ridicule, because it's like you said, they're suffering like a traumatic thing that happened to them, so they're a little afraid to talk about it and what people would think. But Yeah, it's a very touchy subject to some people coming forward. That's for sure.
But a lot of people, regret seeing it. They didn't want to see it in the first place. They had
Yeah.
nightmares they think about every day. It can kind of ruin your life, basically, if you let yourself, if it lets you, if you respond that way to it. I'd like to think I'd see an amazing creature. It'd be a wonderful experience, but it can be very scary for people, particularly people that, you know, just scoff at, oh, I know Bigfoot, then you see one. It could be. I don't know, man. It seems to me that I think the more human looking a Bigfoot would be, the scarier it would be. I mean, it looks just like an ape. Like you ever hear the Billy apes they discovered?
Yeah.
They had these rumors about these 6 foot tall chimps that killed lions, and they found them. And then you didn't hear it about any of these 6 foot apes that it's usually apes live in the trees and they sleep in the trees because they're afraid of predators. These don't care. They sleep on the ground because they kill lions. They're, these amazing creatures. But then you find out about it, then all of a sudden 2 weeks later you don't hear about them anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But
it's weird how that works. It's
yeah,
it's a fascinating world, when it comes to Bigfoot topic, because I mean we have a whole bunch of different sides of it, and I really think it's amazing that people like you taking your talent and what you got there sharing with us. It's just showing evidence right there as well, and I think you're amazing with your artist right there. That's a talent that a lot of people don't have. So well done.
I try. Yeah, well, yeah. If you're interested, my 2 books. Okay. My pen name is Famous John Urban, and I'm not quite that arrogant. It started out as a joke because I started out as a music journalist, and so I just kind of used that name as a joke at first, and kind of caught on. But yeah, if you go to Amazon.com, you put in Famous John Urban, my books pop up there, and then also, like I said, all my other things for my Bigfoot playing poker. If you go to SasquatchTheLegend.com,
That's awesome, John.
Famous John Urban.
Yeah, what I'll have you do is send me all the links. Send me all the links to that, and I'll put them on the bottom of the episodes when they drop. It'll be in the description area, so that way people can go check it out for you. So.
Yeah, because the cool thing about Sasquatch the Legend, they got their website. They make a lot of their own stuff, the T-shirts, and they have what you call the cutting boards shaped like a Bigfoot print and all these things. They have all the stuff you don't see anywhere else. So if you're just looking for Bigfoot merchandise, that's a good place to go. So I love Sasquatch the Legend. So they've been good to me.
Yeah,
so,
I'll definitely be looking into that myself.
Yeah, appreciate it. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you being on the show. But like I said, it's just funny because I only released my first book about 3 or 4 years ago. And like I said, I mean, I got it. There's a place in Alaska called the Bigfoot Art Gallery. I got my book there. I got Florida, I got Maine, I got Texas, I got Oklahoma, and Oregon over there at the Cliff Rockman's Museum.
Yeah.
So
now I know it's there. I'll go swing by and check it out. Get one for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, buy them up in that way. I'll say, okay, I need to order more books.
Yeah.
But yeah, Cliff Rock was really cool. It was funny because the first Florida Bigfoot conference they ever had, he was the guest there. And I got one of those VIP packages the night before they have a dinner, and him and Bobo were there. And so I had already kind of emailed him, showing him some artwork, and he was like, yeah, sure, you can, when you get ready, get your books out, give me a call. So he bought some. So
that's awesome.
He's a cool guy. Yeah, I just love that Bigfoot show. It's just,
yeah, I have respect on him and Bobo. They got definitely different theories when it comes to Bigfoot, and I respect that, and I like their knowledge too. So that's why I keep my mind open, because you're learning from every different types of researchers out there, and especially when it comes to Bigfoot, and what could they be? Ape, some kind of ape, or something more, or who knows? That's what I love about it, because everybody's questioning it, because nobody knows. They really don't know.
Well, one other thing I want to say before we go is about Bigfoot is that I'm always interested when they talk about them having a language. Did you ever hear some of the recordings?
Yeah, like the Sierra Bigfoot, sounds, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's one I saw actually sound like it said brother.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
There's some. Yeah, that's creepy. I mean, where they get these actual like specialists in vocalization stuff, and they say this is some sort of a language. It's not just rambling, and so it just, they're intelligent enough to have a type of a language. It could be very basic. What I was going to say is, do you ever hear that Coco, the gorilla that could do sign language?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can look it up there. Yeah, I don't know if it was in a zoo or research lab or whatever. They had this female gorilla, that she knew over 1,000 words, and she could understand like 2,000. You could have a conversation with her. It's kind of cool. Some big celebrities like Mr. Rogers went and visited her, and Robin Williams went and visited her and stuff. She passed away, the gorilla. But I mean, there's gorilla that could have sign language people. They just don't have the vocal ability to speak. So what if? Because the thing about Bigfoot is, like, when people talk about, I'm just kind of adamant that they're not just another ape like the orangutan or gorilla, because they're mostly bipedal. I mean, sometimes you see them walking on fours. They got the upper body strength and long arms, so they could do that. I think they mostly walk on their hind legs. So gorillas, you'll see them in a zoo. When you see a gorilla, walk around, it's all awkward and stuff like that. So, but I think Bigfoot, they can walk like human. They have human-like hands and feet. Some say they have like facial features that are kind of like human. Some people say they can vocalize and things like that. So there's a little bit more in an ape, I think. They're a little bit, like I said, they have feet like a person. That's not an ape. So I just think there's something more to it than that.
Yeah, I do too. But, I have to agree. I think they're definitely something more than ape. But John, before we go ahead and, you already said it, but go ahead and plug yourself in. Tell people where they can find you, where they can find you on Facebook or whatever you want them to find you, and connect with you on these books.
All right. Well, like I said, I got my 2 books. The first book here is the famous Bigfoot and Yeti Encounters coloring book. And then I got my Goldilocks versus the 3 Bears. What I did with the Goldilocks book is, like I said, I had, when I was a kid, I ordered, I read these. This is like, it's called a little golden book. They have these books, and look how thin this thing is. And so I had the idea of it.
That's awesome.
Kind of gave me an idea we were talking about before, but a little boy that was, taken care of by a bear, and the kid thought could have been a Bigfoot. He thought it was a bear because they didn't know. And I said, what about the 3 bears? A girl goes to the woods and sees a house. And it's got furniture in it and all these things and bowls of food and all that stuff. So I said, well, it kind of sounds more like a Bigfoot. So on mine, to make it a little more interesting, like, these books are very vague. First off, they don't say how old the girl is. It's probably like an 8-year-old girl. And I got 3 or 4 versions of the book, and most of them don't even say why she went in the woods. One time they said she went in the woods to get flowers for her mother. But then she sees a house, bears in the house. It's kind of weird. So my story, I made mine, she's a little bit older. I made her kind of like a Disney princess, where she's like 16 going on 17. And a lot of the Disney princesses are kind of rebellious, like Ariel. She disobeyed her father, trying to go on land and all that stuff. So mine's a little bit more rebellious girl. And we were talking before about the Native American legends and stuff. I'm fascinated with that. And a lot of the Native Americans, what's cool about that is every tribe has their own word for Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, like, Sasquatch is a Bigfoot name, but a lot of the names mean like hairy man or people of the forest. So I like calling them forest people. So I would have had that aspect with the Native Americans. So what I did is, like I said, I made her character more like a Disney princess. And Disney movies, they like to kill off the parents, like Bambi, all these different Little Mermaid, her mother is dead and everything. So I decided, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have her parents, her mother was a Caucasian blonde girl. That's why she has the blonde hair. But her father is a Native American. So the parents died, and she was raised by her Native American grandparents, who were very traditional. And they told her about the forest people, said, don't go in the woods, the forest people carry you away and stuff. But she had this deer that would come to her house. She had a little clearing by the woods that she had pet this and feed this baby deer. And one time the deer didn't show up, and it's gone for like a week. So she decided that she was going to go in the woods to look for the deer. But her grandparents warned her about the Bigfoot. She didn't really believe in Bigfoot, but she did believe they had bears and wolves and mountain lions. So she still faced her fears and went. But then in my story, it's not a house. They go into a cave. It actually has like the X crossings and stuff we talked about. Then when she goes in there, it's like a stone area that they use for a table. And they did have the balls. They did have chairs that kind of made makeshift, like out of limbs and vines and stuff. They had the beds and everything. But it reminds you, they have the Bigfoot come by. So it just kind of, it kind of goes from there about her encountering these Bigfoot family. But yeah, so I just kind of changed up a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, if you go to Amazon.com, look up Famous John Urban, both my books will pull up. And then if you go to Sasquatch Legend, that Ken Hamilton and Lori Hamilton own it. And you can just type in Famous John Urban and all my stuff will pull up. So, but yeah, I'll send you those links and I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Yeah, I'll definitely put those links on the bottom of the episode, and really enjoyed talking with you, John, and I think we'll stay connected, and I'd love to bring you back on because I think I could talk to you about a little everything else with Bigfoot, and I really enjoy having to listen to what your thoughts are on it, and I'd definitely like to bring you back, and we can get in more topics on it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Well, like I said, the whole thing about the woo, I don't like calling it wook. That's like putting it down. I mean, I know that there are some cryptozoologists that are really closed-minded, and they think anyone that doesn't believe, I think, is an idiot. I don't think that way, because the whole thing about them either being like, some Native Americans say that they're like spirits. I heard one story where they this one Native American was going to say that that apparently when a juvenile Bigfoot is kind of coming of age or something, and he needs to prove himself, that they'll have him cloak himself, be invisible, and go right in front of a man and do like one of these deals in front of him. And if he can pass it off, then, so he has this rite of passage is the word I was trying to think of. But I mean, it would explain why, some people say, well, how come there's footprints that just end?
Yeah.
What's up with that?
Yeah, that's interesting.
The whole thing about not finding the bodies, the bones, and all that stuff. So, a lot. So, but it's just, I'm kind of more focused on mine, that I kind of stick to the flesh and blood thing. And
yeah, I respect that.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Well, it's just, I'm just really, because I just turned 62. So I'm just wondering what's going to happen in my lifetime. That's the main thing. When a Bigfoot is caught, I want to see what his face looks like, and how human it is, and if it behaves just like, I mean, I'll be a little bit disappointed if there's a Bigfoot in a zoo and it's just throwing his feces at people and stuff. I think there'd be a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
So, it's like, but at the same time, if it's too intelligent, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of creepy. I just don't know how intelligent it might be. But that's what I'm fascinated about. So
I have to agree with you.
What they look like, because
I only keep an open mind because I rather them just be something natural and flesh and blood in the woods, and that's it. All this other weird stuff, I hope it's something else, or I don't know what to make of it, but there's something going on. Is it connected to Bigfoot? I don't know, but I'm definitely going to keep my mind open to it, because you never know. I'm leaning towards what you say, but I'm keeping my thoughts open.
Yeah, I've been a little bit more flexible if I think about it, but just when people talk to me, like I'm just not that. I haven't really checked in that much, so I'm not knowledgeable about it. But it's, I don't know. It's just me. It's kind of weird. My thoughts on it. Are you a religious person?
I believe in a higher power for sure. I believe there's a God, and I believe in Jesus, and I just kind of I let people know I do, but some people don't. That's okay. That's their preference. I'm not going to judge them. So.
Well, it's just the one thing. It's kind of a obscure or abstract thought of mine. Like in the original, the Garden of Eden, they had Adam and Eve, and they were, very pure, and they were naked and happy to be so. And God wanted them to watch over the garden and the animals and all these things. And they warned them not to eat from the forbidden fruit from the tree. And Satan, appeared as a snake and tempted them into it. And that's the first thing God, when he saw them, that they put on the clothes. He's like, what's up with that? Why are you wearing clothes? Why are you ashamed of your body? And so God punished them for being disobedient, not obeying him. They cast him out. So I'm kind of think Bigfoot kind of lives the lifestyle that God originally intended for early man. They're out in the woods. They may or may not take care of animals. I'm sure they eat them, but still, But it seems like their lifestyle is kind of more pure, like God intended for Adam and Eve.
Yeah,
So who knows? Maybe they're blessed by God. I don't know, but they're.
well, that's what I haven't gotten too deep into the Bible. I read bits and pieces. I don't go to church. I just always believe in a higher power, and there's definitely a creator. Um, I'm not very the person that goes to church every week, but I just like to learn it on my own time. Reading the book, and it made me a believer. Um, and I do believe he created a bunch of different creatures. I think he created us and something else before us, and maybe something else before that. I don't know, but I definitely think that's possible. That just
Well,
like
it does talk a lot about giants.
yeah. See, that's a whole.
Well, there's a lot of mention about giants in the Bible.
Yeah, the giant thing is very interesting to me. I been watching a lot of documentaries on that, and I definitely believe it. And there's been reports that people are seeing these giants, like in Mexico and over in the Middle East, all over the place. And there's been some reports on them, and it makes you wonder: are they something to do, with the fallen angels or something else? And I definitely got to bring somebody on the show and talk about that because I'm learning about it myself, and I find it fascinating.
Yeah, well, just the one thing I'll say, I talk about me being a conspiracy theorist, is that just like museums, there's all these newspaper clippings and things finding these like 10-foot skeletons and stuff. They send it to the Smithsonian Institute, and all of a sudden they conveniently disappear. It gets misplaced or whatever. So I kind of think that the museum, it doesn't follow their guidelines as far as these museums, they don't want to talk about Bigfoot, they don't want to talk about giants. Is like,
Yeah.
So
I agree with you
about that because there's a lot of documented cases where they get photo. I'm sure some be fake, but there's all these newspaper clippings about the giant skeletons, and then they always get disappeared somehow. So to me, it's a little suspicious. So
Yeah, I have to agree. That's what got my attention is that every time I hear a report of somebody finding these things and then all of a sudden it disappears and then it gets, no evidence on it. It's not even there anymore. You're like, what the hell happened? What happened to that story? Why'd they keeping it quiet? So if it's just somebody, making it up.
Yeah, like some of those burial grounds like the Native Americans had, sometimes they find giant skeletons in there.
Yeah.
And then they take pictures of it in the newspaper, and all of a sudden it disappears. And like what happened there,
It freaked me out seeing a giant person, I'll tell you that.
I don't think the government's ready for
So
all right. Well, I appreciate you having me on.
Yep, there was a little delay there. Sorry about that, John. Yeah, I really enjoy you having on, and I'll let you know when this episode drops. And like I said, keep connected, and definitely enjoyed having you on the show, John.
Okay, my pleasure. Well, I'll send you those links, and thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you for coming on. Have a good one, man.
Okay.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Well, guys, that was the show. I really enjoyed having John on. I appreciate him taking the time on, coming on, sharing his books and his thoughts on Bigfoot and much more. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, please subscribe on YouTube. And please, if you're listening to it on Spotify or other platforms, be sure to hit the follow button and rate the show. Rate it after you listen to the show. Rate it 5 stars. That would really help it bring it up and get more people on the show. And I see you made it to the end. I hope you give me a 5-star. Thanks for listening, guys. If you had an encounter or want to come on the show and share it, email me at mountainmanett@gmail.com. And you can message me on Facebook. You can look for Blake Botel. Thanks, guys. Well, it ain't all what it seems, guys. So stay tuned.